Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Greg Kihlstrom. And we're going to be talking about AI and Agile and how we can use Agile as a way of rolling out AI in any organization. I think it's probably the number one subject on any leader's list at the moment about, how can we use AI within the organization and how we can use it effectively. Greg, thank you so much for coming on and joining me. Where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to talking with you. Two places you can find me. I would say first LinkedIn. I'm very active there. Connect with me. Would be happy to talk and connect. The other, I have a website, gregkihlstrom.com. You can get that spelling probably in the title or show notes or somewhere, but that's where I have links to speaking and consulting and books and
you're on your own podcast as well, don't you?
I do, yeah. I have a podcast called The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, so you can find that on Spotify, Apple, all the places.
Excellent. So let's dig in and go straight for it and say, Agile, isn't that like a technical thing? And isn't AI and rolling out a people thing?
Yeah, it's a good point. And Agile, I would say, has its roots in software development. Even before that, it has roots in early days of manufacturing and lean processes and things. But over the years, it's been adopted in a number of different areas. And I think marketing is one of those that I work in quite heavily, and marketing is one of those that adopted it. But there's you hear about Agile HR and Agile operations and things like that. And so really, I look at it as, if you're in software development and you're hardcore Scrum Agile developer, there are rituals and things that you do and cadences. I'm an Agile certified coach. I know all the lingo and all those things. That's, I could talk your ear off about that. But I think in business and when we're talking about adoption of things, it also, the principles behind Agile and behind something specific like Scrum give us some tools that we can use to do things well, do things methodically, iterate on them, and take a look back at how we're improving over time, and not just technically, but also how we work together as groups. And I think that's where it's really relevant with something like AI.
So how do we use Agile to help us roll out? Because I think, as I said in the introduction, I think that every single leader is thinking right now, how on earth do I do that?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think first, I would say there might be some people out there that have some misconceptions about what Agile is or is not. So, just to clear up a couple of things there. One of the biggest misconceptions is that when we're Agile, we're very reactive. Something went poorly yesterday, and so we're going to change everything and pivot, and all these startup-y terms and all those things get thrown out. But to me and to those that really practice true Agile principles, it's a more scientific method of doing things. So, you will perform an experiment, you'll run a test, you'll define what success looks like, or to use Agile words, the definition of done. You'll define that before you ever start, just like a good scientific experiment. And then you'll run that. You won't stop it halfway through just because things don't seem to be working, or maybe things are working too well and you think it's successful. You'll run the experiment, and then you'll look back and say, okay, how did the work that we were doing perform? But also, how was the work about the work? How did we work together as a team? How did we make decisions? Can we do that part better too? Because I think that second part is the most important part. People get lucky sometimes and do things well, or teams can work together well once or whatever. But when you're talking about something like AI adoption, unless you're just implementing one tool and then you're set, these are long-term investments and long-term changes over time, and you need to be able to incrementally adjust. And I think that's where, the incrementality of, okay, we do something, we look back, we talk about it. I think that's incredibly helpful when we're talking about AI adoption.
So in a way, what you're doing is that you're running pilots.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And you're defining what can we do? Let's pick a time increment that's not too much. We're not going to say we're going to do quote unquote AI this year. We're doing a pilot, as you said. We're going to take the next 2 months and we're going to break those 2 months into 2 week or maybe even 3 week increments. And every 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to take a look back and we're going to take a chunk out of the scope. We're going to try to accomplish it, and then we're going to take a look back. Did we do it? Did it work well? Do we even want to move to the next step? Sometimes after you kind of get over the hill, things look a lot different than they did before you got there, right? So, you accomplish something and maybe that much is enough, or maybe it was the complete wrong direction and you do need to pivot at that point. So, it breaks down larger goals and larger strategies into manageable chunks, because I think that's part of the problem that people have with big change is it feels overwhelming. But breaking it down into smaller pieces, then you can start wrapping your head around it, and you have the freedom to, if it's not working, you can change it.
And I think with AI, constantly the discussion that we're having is that AI is about people and process change, not about technology change.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest misconception, I think, of all of this. And I work a lot in marketing technology. I work a lot with organizations that, they buy a big platform or doing a big integration. And I can't say how, even sophisticated organizations, I work with some very large ones as well as some smaller ones. And as sophisticated as you think some of these organizations are, they still fall for this, well, the software is going to solve all these problems that we have and all these communication and leadership and all that stuff. But to your point, people always think that the platform is going to solve everything, but it's the people and process that can make or break it. And they can definitely be part of a successful solution, but just as easily they can be part of derailing something due to, I like to think everybody has the best intentions going into this, but also people don't love change. They get, they're a few years, even several months into a job, they don't really want to change everything about what they do. And so there's some real issues that you need to work with people to make them feel better about these changes.
So what mistakes are companies making at the moment when they adopt AI?
Yeah, I think first of all, not having a very clear use case for how AI is going to benefit them. I think it's more, well, everybody in our industry is doing this. We got to jump on the bandwagon. I've heard great things about Chat GPT or whatever. So just start using it. And I'm of two minds about this. I mean, one, I do think that in order to talk about AI and stuff, you do kind of just need to use it. But that's more like personal, professional development. I think as a companies don't have the time and resources to just have people playing with a lot of stuff and to know direct end. And so maybe allocate a little bit of time for discovery and all that. But companies also need to really clearly outline, this is what we want to do with AI. And, I may have my opinions about what the best use case might be, but having a strong one, having everyone aligned, I think, to be honest, this is classic change management, really, when it comes down to, I mean, all of this stuff, it feels different because we're talking about AI, but switch out AI with literally anything. And it's about align everyone towards the same goal, give them enough visibility on why you're doing the thing in the first place, give them some autonomy. And I think this is where it comes back to some agile principles as well, is trust the team doing the work to determine the best way to do the work. And, they need some guardrails sometimes or whatever, but when there's that level of trust and visibility on the outcomes, you're going to have a lot better success than just some top-down mandate of use AI.
So how do you see that AI can actually help align cross-functional teams?
I think using AI requires maybe not to maybe I'll get around to answering your question directly. I think using it in the best way possible, it requires cross-functional collaboration and work, because I don't look at AI as a marketing tool or a sales tool or a technology tool. I look at it as a horizontal thing that, AI works best when it has access to really good data, and generally speaking, a lot of data and a really broad set of data. So as long as all those things are true, it's going to perform at its best. And you can't just do that if only one team in the organization is using it and feeding it stuff. Like it does best when it's looking across. So given that it's this horizontal thing that sits in an organization, it requires people working probably in very large organizations, possibly in ways they never have before, because they are siloed, and there were probably good reasons in someone's mind, at least, why they were siloed in the first place. But now, we're in the world where our customers are omni-channel, doing wherever they want to be. And internally, I think as AI automates away some of the minutia and some of the repetitive tasks and everything, I think it's elevating everyone's role that's still in the organization to be more strategic and thus thinking more broadly in the organization. So probably not a great answer to your question, but I think it's a requirement of it if it's not happening already.
Yeah, and in Agile, you talk about interactive value delivery. What does that work with complex AI models? How does that work with complex AI models?
Yeah, so I do think, in addition to AI needing data to perform at its best, I think in order to manage any technology adoption or anything like that, the people managing it need to have data on how it's performing and what it's doing and everything. And so I think that is it's an active role that people need to play that they may not have played with other software tools in the past. If a software tool is up, it's and running, that's success in some degrees, and then some other team may use it or something. But to deliver active value, like AI has to be constantly connected and really in a compliant and a safe and secure way, able to understand really as much as that's going on as possible, so that it's about giving people insights and the next best action and all of that as well. So yeah,
because certainly at the moment, I think in industry, what we have is kind of two lots of AI. We have the AI that we're going to train on our own internal knowledge base, which we'll get one answer from. And then we'll turn to ChatGPT, Gemini, or something which is trained on the whole of the internet, and we'll get a different answer.
Right. Yeah.
And certainly the feedback I'm getting from people within who are using AI trained on internal data, you will get a completely different answer.
Yeah, you will. And I mean, this is where I think, it's good to play around with some of those tools as, again, personal development kind of stuff. But a company that really wants to get the best results, they're not going to get great results if the AI is only trained on a subset of their company data. But they're going to get better results if it's allowed, within, again, safety, compliance, all those kinds of things, is able to train on those things. And yet there's also good use cases where using Claude just trained on the internet or whatever can give better result. They're different, to your point. They're going to be vastly different, but sometimes that's the right tool for the job versus using RAG or whatever to like look very specifically at a company's data sets and product descriptions and all that kind of stuff as well. It just kind of, it kind of depends. And also it depends on the scale of the organization. If you're a small business, for instance, I mean, I work mostly with enterprises, so usually, they have enough stuff that an AI can be trained on. But if you're a small company, you may not have enough information for AI to really train successfully. And so you may find ChatGPT or something may work, pretty well if you have it prompted the right way.
Yeah, I mean, we're a small business and we don't have any data at all. So
Right.
we just use the we use Gemini. So or and ChatGPT. So how do you see that that play out in terms of the experimentation versus innovation, and the kind of the risk that you can get with that when people are using AI and you're rolling it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little different than traditional experiments, because I think there a lot of people still don't understand. There's a bit of unpredictability, even though, Gen AI and all that stuff is technically predictive. There's a lot of unpredictability in some of these models, and when it's not trained specifically on your own company's information, there's a bit of risk that it could write a product description that simply isn't accurate, or things like that. So, I do think there needs to be some time spent on, hey, let's play around with some of these things. Let's figure out what makes sense. I mean, I know even in my work, I mean, I'm a small business of my own. I may work for larger companies, but for my podcast, for instance, I've heavily automated things and done all that, and played around with that, and it's actually helped me think through how I could do that at a larger scale even. But taking the time to do that is great. I think leaders need to figure out what that right balance is. If people are just kind of going off in a silo and they use ChatGPT instead of some company, mandated tool or whatever, I don't know that that's incredibly helpful. But if they're going off and using some new tool that could solve a company problem, not every test is successful, right? So like that's totally fine. Like, leaders need to just accept that, okay, we're going to try some things, they're not going to work, but we're going to check those off the list and move on. I think that's a good use of time, even if the tests aren't successful. So I think it's, just some of it's common sense, but some of it's also just being strategic about how you allocate time, and don't allocate 80% of time to playing with toys, as much as we all might like to do that some days.
Yeah.
Allocate the right amount, but continue to do it consistently.
So it's interesting you talk about a leadership perspective and a mindset shift. What do you think is actually required from a leadership perspective because we do need to play with these things,
Yeah.
but as we know, playtime isn't work time, or
Right.
isn't perceived as that. So
Right.
so when we're rolling out AI, what mind shift do we need from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this, and some of this goes back to the agile stuff as well. Is, I think leaders need to accept that not every test, not every experiment is going to be successful. And you can use the word failure if you'd like, but I always think, if an experiment fails but you learn something, it's not a failure.
You learn
You know,
something.
yeah, you've learned something. And I think that's a huge one. And again, it's that's not new with AI. That's been around for, hundreds of years. That leaders have had a hard time with that, but it is what it is. I think the other thing is being willing to accept that something was wrong 6 months ago, but it might be right now. And so, changing your mind. And, from a leader perspective, that's humility.
Yeah.
From just a human perspective, that's being objective enough and not getting stuck on, well, we tried this. I always use the anecdote. I consulted with a company. Somebody was there for like 12 years, and they would often bring up, well, we tried that 8 years ago. And
Yeah.
I'm like, how many other things could you say, are the same 8 years ago as they are today? So, just be willing to not every day, not revisit everything, because nobody has time for that, but like, be willing to revisit your assumptions, because this space is moving quickly. I mean, AI in particular, like, technology always has, but AI in particular is moving incredibly quickly. It may slow down at some point after it hits some, peak or whatever, but things are moving so quickly. Now we've got agentic, all that stuff. Like, there's so much to keep up with. ChatGPT isn't the same product it was 3 years ago alone. So, just making some assumptions, you got to let that go. Even if you drew a line in the sand as a leader, like, just have the humility to be able to say, hey, I was right here, but like, maybe now I wasn't right anymore.
And to have that experimentation culture, and to
Yeah.
understand that a failure is a learning, and to ask the question, so what do if that didn't work, okay, so but what did we learn?
Right. Yes, that's learning is success. And
Yes.
even better if we learned and the test achieved the results we wished it would from the beginning. But any learning is success, and so you do need to make sure that the potential for success is always there when you do an experiment. But you have, just again, to back to the point, you just have to make sure you understand that it's not always going to achieve what it needed to, but have a great way to, and again, that's one of the things I love about Agile is the concept of the retrospective, which is we're looking back and we're not just moving to the next thing and just powering through, and like some thing that didn't work is on some Word doc somewhere that gets buried in a SharePoint folder or whatever. We're actually taking the time to talk about what worked and what didn't and what we wish we could do differently, and we're tracking those things. And that feedback loop is so underrated. I can't imagine, like, everywhere that I go and I work, I like it's the thing that is either making or breaking long-term success.
Greg, thank you so much for coming on and talking about how we can use Agile as a way of rolling out AI with any organization. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for having me on the show. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Just look for Greg Kihlstrom, or my website is gregkihlstrom.com.
Excellent, Greg. Thank you so much. I'm sure if we talked in 12 months' time, we'd have even more to say about AI, because it seems to be changing by the day. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise.
Thanks so much.